My name is Father Esteban Ruiz. I am 47 years old and I am parish priest of the Church of San Miguel Arcangel in Guanajuato, Mexico. I am recording this testimony in April 2024, not because I fear for my life, but because I know what is coming. Something that was shown to me so vividly and so real that I still tremble when I remember it. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't imagination. It was a revelation. And now I feel like I have to share it. It all started during Lent 2022. It was a hot afternoon, the kind that dries out the throat and makes the church bells ring as if they were carrying centuries of history. He had spent several days without hardly any sleep, between confessions, visits to the sick, and preparations for the Palm Sunday procession. As a priest, I always believed that the body should be sacrificed for the soul, but that day my body betrayed me. I felt a strong pang in my chest while celebrating Mass. I thought it was accumulated fatigue or perhaps fasting, but cold sweat began to run down my back and my vision became blurry. I continued praying, clinging to the altar, as one clings to faith in the midst of shipwreck. And then, nothing. Absolute silence. He did not hear the voices of the faithful. I couldn't feel my legs. It was as if time had stopped. I opened my eyes and found myself standing in the center of the church nave. But it was empty. Silent. Unreal. I looked at my hands and they were almost transparent, like they were made of soft light. I turned around and there I was, my body lying on the ground, surrounded by panicking parishioners. One shouted, "Father Esteban, don't die!" That's when I realized he had died, or at least a part of me had crossed over to the other side. Didn't see tunnels of light. I didn't hear heavenly choirs. What I felt was a presence, an immense energy, silent but powerful, that wrapped me inside and guided me. I passed through the walls of the church as if they were mist. And then I was lifted up, not to heaven as we usually imagine, but to a place beyond time. A space where past, present, and future coexisted as overlapping echoes. That was where the visions began. First, my childhood. Then, scenes of suffering in my town, hunger, violence, loneliness. But then, everything changed. I saw St. Peter's, square in Rome empty, covered by dark clouds, a white coffin, the face of Pope Francis on a screen, and a phrase that chilled my soul, In Memoriam, April 2025. And then a voice came from inside me. When the shepherd falls, darkness will cover the world, but not all darkness is the absence of light. Prepare them, strengthen them. Unity will be the shield. And that was just the beginning. I don't know how long that vision lasted. It could have been a second or 1,000 years. In that place where I was taken, time had no meaning. It was as if every second was a seed that contained centuries within. After seeing the death of Pope Francis, I thought my experience was over. But no. It was then that the veil was completely torn. I saw the year 2025. It was not a clear image, like a movie. It was more of a feeling condensed into symbolic scenes, into emotions that pierced me like swords. I saw confused crowds, walking in cities that were crumbling under their feet, as if the world had lost its foundation. I saw churches closed, not because of persecution, but because of abandonment. And I saw something more disturbing. Leaders, rising up with sweet words but empty eyes, preaching unity while sowing division. There was also resistance. Small groups gathered in silence, praying, sharing bread, embracing each other with tears. They were like lights on in a dark night. And I understood that the darkness that voice spoke of was not just physical or political, it was spiritual. It was the fog that is born when the collective soul of humanity forgets its origin. I saw myself already back on earth, writing in a notebook, preaching with a fervor I had never felt before, not out of fear, but out of love. Because what was coming could not be avoided, but it could be faced. Strengthen them, the voice repeated to me over and over again. Teach them to remember, to pray, to not let go of each other's hand. And then, like a flicker of the soul, I returned to the exact moment when my body was lying on the ground. I felt a sharp blow in my chest, as if I was being ripped from that world and thrown back into pain. I opened my eyes amidst screams and tears. A parishioner held my head, crying inconsolably. Another said the Our Father out loud. I breathed again, and I knew I had been sent back on a mission. For weeks I didn't talk to anyone about what I saw, not even in confession. I didn't know if I had lost my mind or if God had really revealed something so profound to me. But the images returned in dreams, in prayers, even when looking into the eyes of the children in the parish. It was impossible to silence him. That's when I started writing this testimony, first in secret, then as part of my homilies, and now like this video you're watching, because 2025 is approaching, and what I saw is closer than we imagined. The months that followed my experience were the most intense of my life, not because something extraordinary was happening externally, but because inside me everything had changed. The words of the voice continued to resonate like an eternal echo. When the shepherd falls. I knew he was referring to Pope Francis. I had seen it. His face serene, his hands crossed over his chest, surrounded by cardinals who were crying, silently. A whole world in mourning, but it wasn't his death that impacted me the most. It was what came next. I began to study every word the Holy Father said from that day on. Their messages, their silences, their gestures. It was as if I was looking for signs, confirmations, something that would tell me, yes, the right thing was revealed to you. In July 2023, when the Pope was hospitalized for a lung infection, my heart stopped for a few seconds. I knelt in front of the tabernacle and prayed like never before. Not so that he would live forever, that is not in our hands, but so that the world would be prepared. In my parish, no one knew exactly why my homilies began to change. I talked about the power of community, the importance of praying as a family, of returning to the gospel as if each word were food for a coming storm. Some thought I was becoming a bit extremist, others that I had simply revived. No one suspected the truth. I was training hearts to resist the night. One night in December 2023, I had another dream. It wasn't an experience like the previous one, but I felt like it was a continuation. I saw a large crowd in front of the Vatican, but this time it wasn't sadness that was in the air. It was confusion. People didn't know what to think, what to do. Some applauded, others cried, and among them walked a dark figure, dressed in authority, who had no face. "The new one will not be like the previous one," said the voice. "That is why you must cling to what is eternal, not to what is visible." I woke up sweating with a phrase tattooed in my mind. The shepherd will fall, the flock will be scattered, but there will be sheep who will know where the light is. From that day, I began to prepare small prayer communities, groups of 5-6 people. I taught them to pray without the need for temples, to read the gospel as if it were a personal letter from God, to share without fear, to love without condition. I didn't tell them the whole truth, just what was necessary. The rest you will know when the time comes. Now, in 2024, I look up at the sky and feel like time is bending again. The clouds I saw over St. Peter's Square are beginning to look like they do today, and I still don't know if I'm ready. In early 2024, after much prayer and sleepless nights, I made a decision that weighed on my soul, to write directly to the Vatican. Not the Pope, but one of the cardinals I met briefly during a pilgrimage years ago when I went to Rome. He didn't know if the letter would reach him, if it would be read, or if it would simply be discarded as the ramblings of a provincial priest. But I felt I had to do it. I began the letter humbly, explaining that I was moved by a vision I had had during a near-death experience. I didn't mention specific details, neither the date nor the image of the coffin, only that I had seen a disturbing future where the church would face an unprecedented test. I begged them to prepare the flock, that they strengthen the faith of the little ones, of the forgotten, of those who have no voice. I wrote that letter with tears. Not out of fear, but out of the responsibility of knowing something so big and feeling so small in the face of it. I sealed it. I blessed her. And I sent it. I never received a response, and maybe I never will, but that letter changed something in me. It was as if, when I wrote it, a part of the message was also sealed in my spirit. I felt like I wasn't alone, that there were others in Mexico, in Africa, in Europe, in the mountains, in the neighborhoods, who were also feeling the same call, the same tremor in their souls, as if God were awakening his sentinels scattered throughout the world. One afternoon after Mass, an elderly woman approached me. He looked at me with eyes full of ancient wisdom and said, "Father, last night I dreamed about you. He was walking among ruins, but he had a lighted lamp." I was speechless. It was exactly one of the images I had seen during my experience. Me in a dark city, guiding others with only the light of a small flame. I took her by the hands and said, "Then let us pray." Not for me, for all those who still don't know what's coming. From that day on, I started writing a spiritual journal, not for me, for whoever comes after me, for those who, perhaps in 2025, find themselves searching for meaning in the midst of chaos. Each page is a piece of my soul and each line a prayer. What I saw, what I felt, what was revealed to me, everything points to a decisive moment, and I know it's getting closer. I don't usually say this easily, but I feel like the time has come. It was at the end of February 2024, during a spiritual retreat on the Cerro del Cubilete, where the great statue of Christ the King stands. I had gone up alone, as I do every year, to fast and pray. The wind was cold and the sky was grey, as if he sensed something. I knelt in front of the image of Christ, closed my eyes, and was taken away again. It wasn't like the first time. This time I didn't feel like I was leaving my body, but rather my mind and soul were pierced by something greater. I didn't hear any words, images only. 3 days. 3 days of darkness. I don't know if they were literal or symbolic, but the anguish I felt was as real as the cold that surrounded me on that mountain. The first day I saw confusion. People running through the streets, not understanding what was happening. Media transmitting contradictory messages. Empty churches. An authority figure speaking from a balcony, but his words held no truth. His voice sounded sweet, but something in his eyes chilled the soul. I saw crosses being removed from public places and a silence thick as fog. The second day I saw fear. Families locked in their homes, armed men patrolling previously quiet streets. I saw many losing faith, saying, "God has abandoned us." But I also saw small prayer circles. Elderly women praying the rosary with lit candles. Young people singing psalms hidden in cellars. It was as if darkness wanted to cover everything, but it couldn't turn off that minimal, resistant light. The third day, I saw rebirth, not in the entire world, but in the hearts of some. I saw children kneeling and crying, saying, "Jesus, don't go away." And that's when the sky began to open, not with thunder, nor fire, nor glory, with silence, a deep silence full of peace, as if God said, "I am here, I always was." When I came to, I was kneeling in front of Christ the King, my face soaked with tears. Nobody else was there, just me, the wind, and a sky that was beginning to open. From that day on, I knew that those 3 days would not be just an external event. They would also be spiritual. The human soul would be tested at its core, in its faith, in its hope, in its capacity to love without guarantees. I returned to Guanajuato with a single sentence written in my notebook. Prepare them for the 3 days. Teach them not to be afraid of the dark. And that's what I've done ever since. One of the hardest things I have had to accept from my experience is that I cannot change the future. The mission was not given to me to avoid what is coming, but to prepare hearts. And that, believe me, hurts, because one would like to protect everyone, shout from the rooftops, force the world to see. But faith does not enter by force, just for love. I began to understand what the voice meant when it told me about the shield. It was not a physical object. It was not armor that could be built. It was something that had to be forged from within: unity, love, unwavering faith. I started with the children. In catechesis, we no longer talked only about commandments or parables. I taught them to listen to their soul, to pray with their hearts. I asked them to write letters to God, as if he were their best friend. Some of those letters made me cry. 1. said, "God, if the world gets sad, I want to sing to you louder." With adults, it was more difficult. Many are tired, hardened by life, skeptical. Some listened to me out of respect, others out of habit. But there was a group that began to feel it. Not to understand with the mind, but with the soul. Simple people, a seamstress, a fruit seller, a young man who had gotten out of drugs. They were the first to tell me, "Father, something is coming, right?" I just nodded. We began to meet in silence. We prayed. We shared bread. We helped whoever needed it. No propaganda, no social networks, like the first Christians. And little by little others began to arrive, not out of curiosity, but because they felt an attraction that they couldn't explain. I called that group the Hidden Lamp. We are not a sect nor a movement, only souls who understand that the light must be turned on before the night comes. 1. Today, during one of our meetings, a young man asked me, "What if all this doesn't happen, Father? What if it was just a dream?" I looked at him with a peace that I didn't know I had and answered, "Then we will have learned to love more, to pray more, to live as brothers. What would we lose?" He lowered his head and smiled. That's the shield. The one that is not seen, the one who does not impose himself, the one that is only built when we choose to be light, even with no guarantee that it will dawn. I know not everyone is ready, but I also know that we are not alone. And although 2025 is approaching like a hurricane on the horizon, there is something I no longer fear, that when darkness falls, I won't be looking for a flashlight. I will be one. It was March 13th, 2024, the anniversary of the election of Pope Francis. Every year on that date we held a special mass in his intention, but this year, something was different. Since early morning I felt a weight on my chest, a restlessness that didn't let me breathe. Normally it wasn't illness, it was something spiritual. As if the soul were awake. I ordered the bells to be rung at noon, as was tradition, but one of them did not ring. It was the oldest, the one dedicated to St. Peter. We went up to check it, but nothing was broken, no rope damaged. Just silence. It was as if that bell had decided to remain silent on its own. That shook me more than I care to admit. That same afternoon, when Mass began, my hands were shaking. I clung to the chalice like someone clings to a promise. I didn't know if anything would happen that day, but the air in the church was different, denser, more sacred perhaps. During the homily, I did not talk about the Pope. I spoke of the Good Shepherd, how when one falls, the sheep must learn to listen to each other, to protect each other, not to flee. I felt like every word that came out of my mouth wasn't mine. It was as if they were dictating to me from within. And at the end of the Mass, a little girl approached the altar. He was 6, 7 years old. He took my hand and said with a sweetness that broke me, "And if the pastor doesn't return, who is going to tell us the stories?" I smiled at him, but my eyes filled with tears. "You, my girl, you are going to count them, and others too, because God's stories never go out." That night I prayed in front of the Blessed Sacrament until dawn, and it was then that I understood. We should not wait for the bell to ring. We should not wait for the official announcement to come. The time is already running out. The spiritual transition began the day I saw his face in that vision. The rest is just the external manifestation of something that is already written deep in the soul of the world. The death of the Pope will not be an end. It will be a door. Towards what? I don't know exactly, but whatever comes will mark the heart of humanity. Since that day, every time I ring the bells, I think of the one who decided to remain silent. And I thank you. Because his silence was a warning, an act of reverence, as if heaven told us, listen to the silence, because in it God speaks. Weeks have passed since that March 13th Mass, and something has begun to change in the atmosphere of Guanajuato. I'm not referring to the weather, but to a kind of invisible vibration. It is as if the air carries a message that only some hearts can translate. A few days ago, a young seminarian I barely know stopped me on the street. He looked at me with a mixture of respect and fear and said to me, "Father, last night I dreamed that you told me, "Get ready because the shepherd's house will be closed." I didn't know what to answer. I was frozen. That exact message was shown to me in my near-death experience, but I had never spoken it out loud. I took it as confirmation that the vision was not mine alone, that God was speaking to more than one. That night I wrote in my journal, "I'm not the only one who sees anymore." The echoes of the future, those waves that seem to come from tomorrow, are reaching others. Sometimes they come like dreams, sometimes like intuitions, and others like an inexplicable cry in front of the altar. In the parish, I have noticed that the faithful are more attentive. There is more silence during Masses. More people arrive before it starts. Some stay long after finishing. It is as if they know that each Eucharist is a treasure that will soon become scarce. A woman approached me and said, "I don't know why, but I'm filling my house with candles. I feel like we will soon need light, and I'm not just talking about electricity." I told him to do what his soul asked of him, because when the Holy Spirit whispers, we must obey, even if we do not understand. The city continues its routine: markets, cars, schools, tourists. But beneath that layer of normality, there is an underground river, an awakening. Something is brewing, and I feel it getting closer. I have begun to organize a monthly vigil in silence without preaching. Just prayer, soft singing, and presence. Whole families come. Some kneel and cry without knowing why. Others just hug each other. It's like we're training our souls for something that doesn't yet have a name. Sometimes I wake up in the early morning with pressure in my chest. It's not a disease, it's anticipation. The soul, when connected to the eternal, feels the movements before the flesh. And on those nights, I only repeat one phrase: "Lord, when the time comes, do not find us asleep." Because 2025 is no longer a distant date. It is a drum that is approaching. We are in April 2024, the same month that I saw written under the face of Pope Francis in my vision. Every day that passes, I feel it closer. It's not fear that moves me. It is something deeper, the weight of a revelation that burns in the chest like a fire that does not go out. This month has been different from all of them. The news seems to have a different rhythm, as if the entire world is holding its breath. I have noticed that many people talk about the Pope, although without knowing why. In cafes, on the streets, even young people who never mention anything spiritual suddenly mention it. It is as if his figure has become omnipresent, not because of popularity, but because of an invisible farewell that has already begun. Last Sunday, while I was preparing the altar, I felt a shudder, a kind of sweet sadness like the one you feel when someone you love is about to leave. And you know it, even if he doesn't say it yet. I stopped, looked at the crucifix and said, in a low voice, "Are you coming, Lord?" There was no response. That night I dreamed of St. Peter's Square again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was filled with a silent crowd, everyone holding candles. And in the center, not a coffin, but a light that slowly ascended, as if the soul of the Holy Father was collected by heaven itself. Nobody was crying, nobody spoke. There was only a deep peace, devastating and beautiful at the same time. When I woke up, I understood something that I didn't see clearly before. The Pope's death will not just be a loss, it will be a seal. The end of a time, and the beginning of another. I don't know what will come next. I saw fragments like pieces of a broken mirror. I saw tensions in the church, confusion among the faithful, voices raised claiming to be the truth. But I also saw little beacons of light. Ordinary people becoming living refuges for others, mothers teaching their children to pray on their knees, young people going out to bring comfort to the sick, a new church without stone temples, but with hearts of fire. In my prayers, I no longer ask that the Pope live longer. I pray that when he leaves, we are worthy of continuing what he started, a church of compassion, of mercy, of hugs instead of walls. April is no longer a month for me. It's a warning, a promise, an hour marked on the divine clock. And as I write, this one word resonates within me like a sacred echo: hold the flame, hold it until dawn. Today is April 24th, 2024. Exactly 1 year from now, if my vision was true, the world will wake up to news that will shake its spirit, the death of Pope Francis. And as I write these lines, I don't know if they are prophetic or simply the vent of a soul with too many scars to remain silent. But there is one thing I do know for sure. Nothing will be the same after that day. I have spent the last few months sowing not words, but silences that invite us to listen, looks that contain sentences, hugs that strengthen. The flock is not fully prepared. Nobody is. But there are more lamps lit than I imagined, more awakened souls, more hearts that beat to the rhythm of the sky. Guanajuato, my city, continues with its bright colors and winding alleys. But beneath that colonial beauty, something is brewing. I have felt how the walls of the parish beat, how the air in the chapel becomes thicker at certain moments, as if angels were passing by in an invisible procession. Today they asked me if I'm not afraid, and I answered the truth. Yes, I am afraid. But it doesn't paralyze me anymore. Fear has become my teacher. It has taught me to pray better, to trust more, to love without reservation. It has shown me that I am not a savior, I'm just a messenger, one among many. Sometimes I feel alone, but then I receive a letter from another priest in Jalisco who says he dreamed of fire falling from the sky, or a nun in Veracruz who writes that she hears footsteps in the night and knows they are from the Spirit. And I understand, we are not few. We are a silent network, woven by divine hands. I don't know if I'll live to see April 2025. Maybe so. Maybe not. But I leave this testimony because I know that someone will find it. Someone will listen to it. Someone, in the midst of chaos, will remember these words. Darkness is not the end. It is the cradle of the next light. And when everything seems lost, when the world bows down to new idols, when even the faithful doubt, there will be those who in silence in a corner of the world light a candle, read a psalm, caress a rosary, embrace another with tenderness. And then God will know that there is still hope. I don't know what the new time will be like. I don't know who will take the staff. I don't know if what I saw will be fulfilled precisely or in symbol, but I know we are on the edge of the threshold. And from this side, I wait, with a burning heart.